The big room on Zentari Prime was filled with creatures from across the galaxy. 7 different alien races sat around a huge crystal table that sparkled under the bright lights. Each one looked very different from the others. Some had blue skin that glowed softly. Others looked like walking rocks made of crystal. A few had long arms like tentacles that moved slowly through the air. Ambassador Kethvar looked like a giant octopus but walked on 2 legs. His skin was dark purple and covered in small bumps. He held a flat device in one of his tentacle hands and read from it with nervous movements. His big yellow eyes kept looking up at the 2 humans sitting across from him. Commander Jake Morrison was a tall man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. He wore a dark blue uniform with shiny buttons and small metal pieces that showed his rank. His hands were folded on the table and he sat very still. He looked calm, but his eyes were always watching everything around him. Next to Jake sat Dr. Lisa Grant. She was a woman in her 40s with brown hair pulled back tight. She wore a white coat over her uniform and had a small computer tablet in front of her. Her eyes moved from one alien to another with great interest. She had spent her whole life studying life forms and had never seen anything like this before. Trad. Room was quiet except for the soft humming of machines that kept the air clean and cool. Large windows showed the purple sky of the alien planet outside. Strange flying creatures moved past the windows like colorful birds, but with too many wings. 3 months ago, everything had changed for both humans and aliens. A human ship called the UES Liberty had appeared near Kepler Station using faster-than-light travel. It was the first time humans had ever traveled between the stars. The aliens had been watching Earth for a long time, but had never made contact before. Kethvar finally spoke. His mouth made clicking and whistling sounds, but a small machine changed his words into perfect English. Human Morrison, your people have built ships that can travel faster than light. This is very unusual. Our records show that your people only discovered fire 12,000 years ago. Jake nodded his head slowly. Yes, that sounds about right. We have learned many things since then. A blue alien with 4 arms leaned forward. Her name was Ambassador Yathara, and she was from a race called the Zephyrians. Her skin had patterns of light that moved across her body like slow lightning. The patterns were showing that she was worried or scared. Commander Morrison, she said in a voice that sounded like music, we have looked at your ship very carefully. The technology inside it should take thousands and thousands of years to develop. How did your people do this so fast? Dr. Grant looked at Jake for a moment before she answered. We have always been good at learning new things. When we want to solve a problem, we usually find a way to do it pretty quickly. The aliens around the table made small sounds. Some clicked their teeth or moved their tentacles in ways that showed they were surprised. A creature that looked like it was made of living metal spoke next. Its voice sounded like 2 pieces of metal rubbing together. Define quickly, it said. Jake thought for a moment. Well, we went from riding horses to flying in machines in about 50 years. We went from the first flying machine to landing on our moon in about 60 years. We built our first computer and then created thinking machines in less than 100 years. The metal creature made a sound like a bell ringing. Other aliens started talking to each other in their own languages. The room filled with clicks, whistles, musical sounds, and grinding noises. The translation machines worked hard to change all the sounds into words the humans could understand. Impossible, said one voice. Too fast, said another. Something is wrong, said a third. Kethvar raised one of his tentacles to make the room quiet again. Humans, you must understand our concern. Most races in the galaxy take many thousands of years to make such progress. My own people took 8,000 years to go from basic tools to spaceflight. A small alien that looked like a walking tree spoke up. Its voice was very quiet and sounded like wind moving through leaves. The Chlorian Empire needed 12,000 years to develop faster than light travel after they first left their home planet. Dr. Grant made notes on her tablet as each alien spoke. How long did it take your people to develop medicine that could cure diseases? She asked. The tree alien was quiet for a long moment. We still struggle with many illnesses. Perhaps 6,000 years of work has given us basic healing. We cured most of our major diseases in about 200 years, Dr. Grant said without thinking about how this might sound to the aliens. The room became completely silent. Several aliens moved back in their chairs. The blue patterns on the Chaya Zephyrian skin started flashing very fast. 200 years? Cathavar's tentacles were moving in circles now. You eliminated diseases that kill your people in only 200 years? Jake could see that the aliens were getting very worried. He tried to make them feel better. We are good at working together when we need to solve problems. When people were dying from diseases, we worked very hard to find cures. When we wanted to fly, we kept trying until we could build machines that worked. But his words did not help. A large alien that looked like a huge bear with 6 legs spoke in a deep voice that made the walls shake. Human Jake, your people sound like they do, not except that some things are impossible. Jake smiled a little. Well, we do not really believe in impossible. We just think some things are harder than others. If something seems impossible, we try to figure out why, and then find a way around the problem. This made the aliens even more nervous. The crystal creature actually started glowing brighter. The tree alien's leaves began shaking even though there was no wind in the room. Cathavar stood up slowly. All of his tentacles were moving now and his yellow eyes were very wide. Commander Morrison, Dr. Grant, you speak of these achievements as if they are normal, as if any race should be able to do such things quickly. Lisa nodded. They seem normal to us. Every generation of humans has solved problems that the generation before them could not solve. We expect to keep getting better at things. But there must be limits, Kaur, said the Zephyrian ambassador. Her light patterns were now flashing red, which meant she was afraid. Surely your people understand that some knowledge takes time to grow. Some achievements require patience and many years of careful work. Jake and Lisa looked at each other. They were starting to understand that they had said something that scared the aliens, but they were not sure what it was. We are usually pretty patient, Jake said carefully. But when we really need something, we tend to find ways to get it done faster. We do not like waiting if we do not have to. The metal alien made a sound like a hammer hitting metal. How long did your people take to develop the weapons you use in your wars? This question made Jake uncomfortable. He knew that humans had been very good at making weapons throughout their history. We have been making better weapons for thousands of years. Each time we learn something new, we usually find ways to use it in both helpful and harmful ways. And you have wars often? Asked the bear-like alien. We have had many wars throughout our history, Jake admitted. But we have also used what we learned from those conflicts to develop better technology, better medicine, and better ways to travel and communicate. The room was quiet again, but this time the silence felt heavy and worried. The aliens were looking at each other and then back at the humans. Some of them were making small movements with their hands or tentacles that seemed to be a kind of sign language. Finally, Cathavar spoke again. His voice was very careful now. Humans, we welcome you to the galactic community, but we think it would be good for all of us to learn more about each other before we make any big decisions about the future. Jake nodded. We would like that, too. We have a lot to learn about the galaxy and about all of your people. But as the meeting ended and the aliens filed out of the room, Jake and Lisa could hear them talking quietly to each other. The translation machines picked up words like dangerous, too fast, and unpredictable. The humans had come to the stars looking for friends and knowledge. They had no idea that their simple honesty about human nature had just planted the first seeds of fear in the minds of an entire galaxy. 2 weeks had passed since the first meeting on Zentari Prime. Now the alien visitors were on Luna Station, a huge space station that humans had built near Earth's moon. The station was made of white metal and glass and spun slowly in space to create gravity inside. From the outside, it looked like a giant wheel with spokes reaching to the center. Chief Engineer Pete Collins was a short man with thick arms and hands that were always a little dirty from working with machines. He had been fixing things since he was a boy and knew every part of Luna Station like it was his own home. Today he was showing a group of alien visitors around the station's power systems. The group walked through wide hallways with windows that showed the black space outside. Earth hung in the distance like a blue and white marble. The aliens moved carefully, still getting used to the artificial gravity that the spinning station created. Pete stopped in front of a huge door marked with warning signs. "This is where we make most of our power," he said as the door slid open. Inside was a room filled with large machines that hummed quietly. Pipes and cables ran everywhere, and small lights blinked on control panels. "These are fusion reactors," Pete explained. "They work by smashing tiny pieces of matter together to make energy. It is the same process that makes the sun shine." Delegate Morteth stepped forward to get a better look. He was from a race called the Silicon Collective, and his body looked like it was made of living crystal. When he moved, light reflected off his surfaces and made rainbow patterns on the walls. His voice sounded like wind blowing through a cave. "This is very impressive, Human Pete," Morteth said. "How long did it take your people to learn how to control the power of stars?" Pete scratched his head and left a small smudge of grease in his gray hair. "Well, let me think. We figured out the basic ideas in the 1930s. That was when our smart people first understood how fusion worked. We built our first hydrogen bomb in 1952, which was fusion used as a weapon. Then we spent about 80 years learning how to make fusion give us power instead of just making explosions. Our first fusion power plant started working in 2031. Pete paused and counted on his fingers. "So I guess about a century from start to finish. Maybe a little less." Morteth's crystal body began to shake slightly. The other aliens in the group stopped talking and stared at Pete. "A century?" Morteth repeated. "Only 100 years?" "Yeah, about that," Pete said. He could see that the alien was upset, but did not understand why. "Was that too slow?" "We probably could have done it faster if we had worked together better instead of having wars and stuff." The crystal alien made a sound like glass breaking. "Human Pete, my people needed 4,000 years to go from splitting atoms to fusing them. 4,000 years of careful study and slow progress." Before Pete could respond, Dr. Helen Carter walked into the room. She was a tall woman with white hair and bright eyes behind thick glasses. She carried a tablet computer and wore a lab coat over her uniform. She had heard the conversation from the hallway. "Oh, fusion was actually one of our slower projects," Helen said with a friendly smile. "We went from the first airplane flight to landing on the moon in just 66 years. The computer revolution was even faster. We went from room-sized machines that could barely add numbers to artificial intelligence in about 80 years." The group of aliens became very quiet. Some of them stepped backward. A blue-skinned alien named Ambassador Vexillia started making small whistling sounds that her translator said meant she was very nervous. "Dr. Helen," said Ambassador Kethvar, whose tentacles were moving in slow circles. "You speak of these achievements as if they happened quickly. But what you describe would take most civilizations many thousands of years." Helen looked confused. "Really? But these seem like natural progressions to us. Once we understood the basic science, the engineering was just a matter of working out the details. When we have a problem, we keep trying different solutions until something works." A small alien that looked like a walking plant raised one of his branch-like arms. "But surely you must have had periods where progress stopped. Times when your people could not solve certain problems for many generations." Dr. Carter thought about this for a moment. "Not really. Sometimes we get stuck on a problem for a few years or maybe a decade, but usually someone comes up with a new approach or a different way of thinking about it. We do not like being stuck, so we keep trying." Pete nodded in agreement. "Yeah, like when we wanted to build computers that thought like people. That seemed impossible for a while. But we just kept making the computers faster and giving them more memory until they could do it." "How long did that take?" asked Morteth, though his voice suggested he was afraid to hear the answer. "From the first idea to working artificial intelligence? Maybe 40 years of serious work," Helen replied. "Though we are still making improvements." The metal alien from the first meeting was part of this tour group. Its name was Constructor Prime Zethok, and it spoke in a voice that sounded like machinery. "Humans, what you describe is not normal development. Most races hit barriers that take centuries or millennia to overcome. You speak of solving fundamental problems in decades. Dr. Carter adjusted her glasses and looked at the group of worried aliens. I think maybe we approach problems differently than you do. When we hit a barrier, we do not accept that it cannot be overcome. We look for ways to go around it, under it, or through it. Sometimes we have to invent completely new tools or new ways of thinking. But what about the laws of physics? Asked Ambassador Vexlea. Surely there are limits that cannot be broken. Pete and Helen looked at each other and smiled a little. Well, Pete said, we used to think heavier than air flight was impossible. We used to think traveling faster than sound was impossible. We used to think splitting atoms was impossible. And now you travel between stars, Morteth said quietly. Right, Helen agreed. When someone tells us something is impossible, we usually ask why it is impossible. Then we figure out if the reasons are real limits or just problems we have not solved yet. The group continued the tour, but the aliens were much quieter now. They looked at every machine and computer with new eyes. These were not just tools built by an advanced civilization. These were the products of minds that refused to accept limitations. In the station's cafeteria, the aliens watched humans eating and talking. The conversations were about normal things like family and work and sports. But occasionally someone would mention a project they were working on or a problem they were trying to solve. The casual way humans talked about overcoming technical challenges made the aliens very uncomfortable. We are working on a new type of engine that might let us travel even faster, one human engineer told another over lunch. My team is trying to figure out how to make materials that are stronger than anything we have now, said a second person. I heard the research station is working on ways to control gravity, added a third. Each casual comment hit the aliens like a physical blow. These humans were not just advanced, they were actively working to become even more advanced, and they seemed to think this was perfectly normal. Later that day, the alien delegates met privately in their quarters aboard their own ship. The room was filled with worried voices speaking in many different languages. They do not understand what they are, said Ambassador Vexlea. They think rapid advancement is normal. They speak of changing the fundamental forces of the universe as if it were a hobby project, added Constructor Prime Zethok. Morteth's crystal body had stopped glowing entirely, which was a sign of deep distress among his people. What frightens me most is that they seem to be getting faster at solving problems, not slower. Each generation builds on what the previous generation accomplished. Ambassador Kethvar floated in the center of the room, his tentacles barely moving. We must inform the Galactic Council immediately. The humans are not just another developing species. They are something entirely new. But they seem peaceful, protested the plant-like alien. They have not threatened anyone. They do not need to threaten, Kethvar replied. Their very existence is a threat to the established order. If they continue developing at this rate, they will surpass every civilization in the galaxy within a few centuries. The aliens looked at each other with growing fear. They had come to Luna Station to learn about humanity's culture and technology. Instead, they had discovered something that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity was not just another spacefaring race. They were a force of nature that could not be stopped or controlled. And the most terrifying part was that the humans themselves did not seem to realize how dangerous they were. They solved impossible problems and broke fundamental limits as casually as others might solve simple puzzles. To them, it was just another day of being human. The galaxy would never be the same, and these alien visitors were the first to truly understand what that meant. The Galactic Council ship floated silently in the dark space between two star systems. It was a massive vessel, larger than most space stations, built by 7 different alien races working together. The ship looked like a giant flower made of metal and crystal, with each petal representing a different civilization's technology and design. Deep inside the ship, in a room with no windows, the emergency council meetings had been going on for 3 days without stopping. The air recycling systems worked constantly to keep the atmosphere breathable for 7 different types of life forms. Some aliens needed more oxygen, others needed different gases entirely. Fleet Admiral Zixara paced back and forth across the room. She was from the Centauri Defense Force and looked like a tall human woman except her skin was silver, and her eyes were completely black. She had been a military commander for over 200 years, and had never seen anything that worried her as much as the reports about humans. The other council members sat around a curved table, made of some kind of glowing stone. Each alien had different needs, so their chairs were shaped differently. Some needed to float in special liquid, others required specific temperatures or lighting. Counselor Veshitar was reading from multiple data screens at once. He had 4 eyes that could move independently, allowing him to process much more information than most creatures. His skin was covered in small scales that changed color based on his emotions. Right now, they were showing deep red patterns that meant extreme concern. The humans say their industrial revolution started only 300 years ago, Veshitar reported. In that short time, they have eliminated most diseases that kill their people. They have learned to fly through space. They have built machines that can think. They have learned to change the basic building blocks of life itself. Science coordinator Pelnix made a soft humming sound that indicated distress. She looked like a large insect with 6 arms and compound eyes that could see many different types of light. Her people were known throughout the galaxy for their careful, methodical approach to scientific discovery. The situation is worse than we initially calculated, Pelnix said. Analysis of their historical record shows that humans have been fighting wars almost constantly throughout their development. Most species become less aggressive as they advance technologically. Humans appear to have used warfare as a tool to speed up their advancement. The room became very quiet. War was something that most galactic civilizations had moved beyond thousands of years ago. The idea of using conflict to drive progress was both alien and terrifying to these peaceful races. A new voice joined the conversation. Admiral Ben Parker had been invited to represent the human military and answer questions from the council. He was an older man with gray hair and many lines on his face that told stories of difficult decisions and long years in space. He wore a simple dark blue uniform with small metal symbols that showed his rank and service record. Ben had commanded ships in 3 separate conflicts on the outer edges of human space. He had seen combat against space pirates and had led rescue missions to save colonies from natural disasters. His experience made him exactly the kind of human that the aliens most wanted to understand and most feared to meet. Fleet Admiral Zixara stopped pacing and turned to face the human officer. Admiral Parker, the Council has asked you here because we need to understand your species better. The rate at which humans develop new technology concerns us greatly. Ben sat down at the table and looked around at the assembled aliens. He could see the worry in their faces, even though they looked very different from humans. Fear and concern seemed to be universal emotions. I understand your concerns, Admiral, Ben said in a calm voice. What specific questions can I answer? For you? Counselor Veshitar leaned forward, his 4 eyes focusing on the human. Admiral, your species has achieved more technological advancement in centuries than most races accomplish in tens of thousands of years. How is this possible? Ben thought carefully before answering. He had been briefed about how sensitive this topic was, but he also believed that honesty was the best approach. From our perspective, we have been taking our time with most developments. Most of our major breakthroughs happened because we had immediate problems that needed solutions. Taking your time? Science Coordinator Pelnix made that humming sound again, louder this time. Admiral, you developed interstellar travel faster than most species develop advanced agriculture. Well, Ben replied with a small smile, we have always been pretty good at solving problems when we really need to. The thing is, we are really just getting started with what we can do. The last part of his statement hit the room like a bomb going off. Several aliens made sounds of shock or fear. One creature that looked like a walking tree actually started shaking so hard that its leaves fell off. Fleet Admiral Zixara sat down heavily in her chair. What do you mean by just getting started, Admiral? Ben realized he had said something that scared them, but he was not sure how to explain it in a way that would be less frightening. I mean that we are still learning what we are capable of. We have only been traveling between stars for about a century. Most of our people still live on our home planet. We have not really begun to expand into the galaxy or develop our full potential. A large alien that looked like a bear made of living rock spoke in a voice so deep it made the walls vibrate. Human Ben, you speak as if your current achievements are minor accomplishments. They are not minor, Ben said quickly, but they are just the beginning. We are still figuring out the basics of space travel, energy production, and how to live on other worlds. Once we really understand these things, we will start working on the more interesting projects. More interesting projects? Counselor Veshitar's scales were now flashing bright red and orange. What could be more advanced than faster than light travel and artificial intelligence? Ben looked around the room and saw that every alien was staring at him with intense focus. He realized that his honest answer might frighten them even more, but he decided to continue being truthful. Well, we have some theoretical work on controlling time that shows promise. We are looking into ways to create energy from nothing by manipulating space itself. Some of our scientists think we might be able to build machines that can create new kinds of matter that do not exist naturally. The room erupted in sounds of alarm. Aliens were clicking, whistling, humming, and making grinding noises. The translation systems were working overtime to convert all the different languages into words that Ben could understand. "Impossible," said one voice. "They cannot be serious," said another. "Time manipulation is beyond even theoretical possibility," said a third. Fleet Admiral Zixara raised her hand to restore quiet to the room. When she spoke, her voice was very controlled, but Ben could hear the fear underneath the calm words. "Admiral Parker, the technologies you described casually are beyond what any civilization in the galaxy has achieved. Most of what you mentioned is considered theoretically impossible by our greatest scientists." Ben nodded. "Yeah, our scientists said the same things about a lot of our current technology 50 years ago. We have learned that impossible usually just means we have not figured out how to do it yet." Science Coordinator Pelnux made a sound like a tea kettle whistling. "But surely your people understand that some laws of physics cannot be broken. Some barriers cannot be overcome." "Maybe," Ben admitted, "but we will not know for sure until we try. And if we cannot break a law of physics, maybe we can find a way to work around it or find a different approach entirely." The casual way Ben talked about circumventing the fundamental laws of reality made several aliens physically move away from him. To beings who had spent thousands of years carefully studying each small advancement, the human approach seemed reckless and dangerous. Counselor Veshitar spoke again, his voice barely controlled. "Admiral, how long do you estimate before humans attempt these more interesting projects?" Ben shrugged. "Hard to say exactly. We like to be thorough when we work on something really big. Maybe a few centuries for the basic research, then probably another century or two to build working prototypes." The attempt to reassure the aliens by mentioning a timeline of centuries had exactly the opposite effect. To creatures who measured major achievements in spans of thousands or tens of thousands of years, the idea of mastering time and space within a few hundred years was absolutely terrifying. After Ben left the meeting, the aliens sat in stunned silence for a long time. Finally, Fleet Admiral Zixara spoke in a whisper. "They do not even realize what they are. They think casual manipulation of reality is a normal goal for any intelligent species." The galaxy had encountered many different civilizations over millions of years. Some were peaceful, some were aggressive, some were highly advanced, others were primitive. But never before had they encountered a species that treated the impossible as merely inconvenient. The age of humanity was beginning, and the established powers of the galaxy were just starting to understand what that truly meant. The exploration ship moved slowly through the dark space at the very edge of the galaxy. It was a new kind of vessel, built by humans and aliens working together. The ship combined the best technology from both groups, creating something that neither could have built alone. Captain Roy Henderson stood on the bridge looking out at the strange lights that danced in the distance. He was a calm man who had been chosen for this mission because he was good at talking to different kinds of people and staying cool under pressure. His brown hair was starting to show gray at the edges, and his green eyes had seen many strange things during his years in space. The ship carried scientists and explorers from 12 different alien species. They had come to the edge of the galaxy to study unusual energy readings that their instruments had detected. No one knew what was causing the strange signals, but everyone wanted to understand them. Dr. Nina Brooks worked at her station near the center of the bridge. She was a small woman with red hair and bright blue eyes that missed nothing. She was the chief scientist for the human part of the mission and had spent most of her life studying how things worked. Her computer screens showed complex diagrams and numbers that told the story of the mysterious energy sources they were investigating. The bridge was designed to accommodate many different types of life forms. Some aliens needed to float in special tanks, others required different types of light or air. The air recycling system worked constantly to keep everyone comfortable and healthy. During the daily briefing, Dr. Brooks was explaining human engineering philosophy to her alien colleagues. She stood in front of a large screen that showed pictures of human technology and how it had developed over time. The thing about human engineering, she said, pointing to images of ships and machines, is that we do not really accept the word impossible. If something cannot be done, we try to figure out why it cannot be done. Then we work on changing the reasons that make it impossible. Xenotechnician Prime. Kelthune listened carefully to every word. His people looked like large spiders made of metal and crystal, and they had spent 10,000 years slowly perfecting their current level of technology. They believed that good engineering required patience and many generations of careful improvement. But surely some barriers cannot be overcome, Kelthune said. His voice sounded like wind blowing through metal tubes. Some knowledge must take time to develop properly. Some discoveries require many lifetimes of study. Dr. Brooks shook her head and smiled. Not really. Take faster-than-light travel as an example. We knew it was impossible according to our understanding of physics at the time. So instead of giving up, we started working on ways to change our understanding of physics. It took us about 50 years to figure out how to do it once we decided it was necessary. The casual mention of rewriting the fundamental laws of physics as a 50-year project made several aliens in the room step backward. Kelthune's crystal parts started vibrating, which was a sign of extreme distress among his people. Navigator Prime Yithish was floating in a tank of blue liquid near the back of the room. Her people lived in water and looked like jellyfish with many tentacles. She had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. Dr. Brooks, you speak of changing physics as if it were a normal engineering problem. This is not how most species approach scientific advancement. Captain Henderson had been listening to the conversation while monitoring the ship's progress toward their destination. He could see that his scientist was making the aliens nervous, but he was not sure why. He decided to step in and try to clarify things. Look, I know our development methods seem unusual to you, he said, addressing the whole group. But you have to understand that we are problem solvers by nature. We see something that needs to be done and we figure out how to do it. We are not even close to reaching our full potential yet. Science Coordinator Thexula was a creature that looked like a large bird made of living light. Her feathers glowed, with different colors that showed her emotions. Right now, they were flashing yellow and red, which meant she was very worried. What do you mean by full potential, Captain Henderson? She asked. Henderson thought about how to explain this without making the aliens more nervous than they already were. Well, we have only been traveling between stars for about a century. We still have most of our population living on just one planet. We have not really started expanding into the galaxy yet. We have not begun serious terraforming projects to make new worlds suitable for life. We have not developed our full industrial capacity. The implications of what the captain was saying slowly sank in among the alien observers. If humanity in its current state, with most of its people still on one planet, could match or exceed the achievements of galactic civilizations, what would they become when they truly began to expand? Navigator Prime Yathesh floated closer to the front of her tank. Captain, when you say you have not started expanding, what exactly do you mean? I mean, we are basically still in the preparation phase, Henderson replied. We are still learning the basics of space travel and how to live on different worlds. We are still figuring out how to efficiently move large numbers of people and equipment between star systems. Dr. Brooks nodded in agreement. Right now, we have maybe a few million people living away from Earth, spread across a dozen colonies. But Earth has over 10 billion people. Once we really start moving people to other worlds and building up our space-based industries, things will change very quickly. A small alien that looked like a walking crystal spoke up. How quickly do you estimate this expansion will take place? Henderson and Brooks looked at each other. Well, Henderson said, our planners think we could have 100 colonies within 50 years if we really focused on it. Maybe 1,000 colonies within 2 centuries if everything goes according to plan. The number hit the aliens like a physical blow. Most galactic civilizations had taken thousands of years to establish even a dozen colonies. The idea of humans spreading to 1,000 worlds in just 2 centuries was beyond their ability to comprehend. Kelthun made a sound like metal breaking. Captain, you speak of colonizing 1,000 worlds as if it were a routine construction project. It kind of is, Dr. Brooks said. Once we solve the basic problems of transportation and life support, it becomes a matter of scaling up our operations. We are good at taking a process that works on a small scale and making it work on a much larger scale. The bridge became very quiet. The only sounds were the humming of machines and the soft bubbling from Navigator Prime Yethesh's tank. The aliens were all looking at each other with expressions of growing alarm. Captain Henderson noticed the change in mood and tried to reassure his alien colleagues. Do not worry about the timeline. These are long-term plans. We are not going to start massive expansion tomorrow. We want to make sure we do things properly. But his attempt to calm their fears had the opposite effect. The aliens were beginning to realize that humans considered massive galactic expansion to be something they would do properly and carefully, not something that was impossibly difficult. Science Coordinator Thexula's feathers were now flashing bright red. Captain Henderson, when humans say they're going to do something properly, what does that mean? Henderson thought for a moment. It means we will take our time to understand all the problems involved, develop good solutions, and then execute our plans efficiently. We do not like to rush into things without proper preparation. How much time do you consider adequate for proper preparation? Asked Kelthun. For something as big as galactic colonization? Maybe 20 or 30 years of serious planning and development work, Henderson replied. The alien stared at him in silence. 20 or 30 years was barely a moment in galactic terms. Most civilizations took centuries just to plan a single new colony, let alone hundreds of them. Dr. Brooks continued her explanation, unaware of the growing panic among her audience. The real challenge is not the colonization itself. That is just engineering and logistics. The interesting part will come later, when we have the resources and infrastructure to start working on the really big projects. What kind of big projects? Navigator Prime Yethesh asked, though her voice suggested she was afraid to hear the answer. Well, once we have a solid industrial base spread across multiple star systems, we can start thinking about stellar engineering. Maybe rearranging solar systems to be more efficient, building artificial worlds, creating pocket dimensions for extra living space. Henderson nodded. Our theoretical physicists have some interesting ideas about manipulating time and space on a large scale. But those projects are probably still a few centuries away. We want to make sure we understand the basics before we attempt anything that ambitious. The casual way the humans discussed restructuring reality itself as a future hobby project was more than the aliens could handle. Several of them began making distress calls to their home worlds. Others started backing toward the exits. The humans had no idea that their honest discussion of future plans had just convinced an entire group of alien scientists that humanity represented the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was held at Nexus Station, a massive structure that floated in neutral space far from any star system. The station was built like a giant sphere, with hundreds of docking ports for ships from different civilizations. Inside, it had meeting rooms designed to accommodate every known form of intelligent life in the galaxy. Representatives from every major civilization had come to this meeting. Some had traveled for weeks to get here. Others had used their fastest ships and most advanced communication systems. The urgency in their messages had been clear. This was not a routine diplomatic gathering. This was a crisis that could change the future of all life in the galaxy. The main council chamber was enormous, with a dome ceiling that showed the stars outside. Seats and platforms were arranged in concentric circles, each level designed for different types of beings. Some aliens needed to float in special liquids, others required specific atmospheric conditions or lighting. Ambassador Carl Thompson sat at the witness table in the center of the chamber. He was a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, who had spent his career helping different groups of people work together. Next to him sat General Kate Phillips, a tough woman with short gray hair, who commanded the human military forces in space. Dr. Sam Rogers completed the human delegation. He was a young man with dark hair and curious eyes who had spent his life studying the fundamental laws of science. The three humans looked calm and professional, but they could sense the tension in the huge room around them. Hundreds of alien beings watched them with expressions that ranged from curiosity to fear to barely controlled panic. High Counselor Thexmar was the oldest member of the council and had been leading galactic diplomacy for over 1,000 years. His people looked like large trees with faces carved into their bark, and his voice was deep and slow like wind through an ancient forest. Ambassador Thompson, High Counselor Thexmar began, "The Council has called this session because we need to understand humanity's future intentions. Your species' rapid advancement has created concerns throughout the galactic community." Carl nodded respectfully. "We appreciate the opportunity to address any concerns, High Counselor. Humanity's intentions are peaceful exploration and cooperation with all intelligent life. We want to learn from the galaxy's many civilizations and contribute what we can to the common good." Counselor Vexithea of the Outer Rim Alliance leaned forward in her floating chair. She looked like a jellyfish made of blue light, and her voice sounded like music played underwater. "Your peaceful intentions are noted, Ambassador, but our projections suggest that your civilization will surpass most galactic technologies within a few centuries. What happens when humanity becomes the most powerful force in known space?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. Every alien in the chamber was waiting for the answer. Many had their own fears about what an advanced humanity might do to less powerful civilizations. Dr. Rogers straightened in his chair and spoke with the enthusiasm of someone who loved his work. "Well, by then we will probably be ready to start working on the really interesting scientific projects. Stellar engineering looks very promising. We have some early theoretical work on pocket dimension research that shows great potential. Our physicists think timeline manipulation might be possible within a few centuries." The casual mention of timeline manipulation as a future research project caused visible shock throughout the chamber. Several aliens made sounds of alarm. Others began talking urgently to their advisors in their native languages. General Phillips noticed the strong reaction and tried to reassure the council. "Please do not worry about the time frame for these projects. We are talking about long-term goals here. We would not attempt stellar engineering on a large scale for maybe 2 or 3 centuries. We believe in being careful and thorough with anything that could affect entire star systems." The attempt at reassurance had exactly the opposite effect that General Phillips intended. To beings who measured technological progress in thousands or tens of thousands of years, the idea of restructuring stars within 3 centuries was absolutely terrifying. A large alien that looked like a walking mountain of crystal spoke in a voice that made the floor vibrate. "Humans, you speak of manipulating stars and time as if these were normal engineering projects. Do you not understand the enormous power you are describing so casually?" Ambassador Thompson looked around the chamber and began to understand why the aliens seemed so frightened. "I think there may be a fundamental difference in how our species approach challenges. When humans see a problem that needs solving, we work on it until we find a solution. We do not accept that things are impossible forever." High Counselor Thexmar's ancient voice carried a note of desperation. "But surely your people recognize that some limits cannot be overcome. Some forces are too powerful for any civilization to control." Dr. Rogers shook his head with a friendly smile. "We used to think that about a lot of things. Flying was impossible until we built airplanes. Going to the moon was impossible until we figured out rocket technology. Faster than light travel was impossible until we learned how to bend space. Each time we encounter something impossible, We just treat it as a puzzle to solve. The chamber erupted in sounds of distress. Aliens were clicking, whistling, humming, and making grinding noises in dozens of different languages. The translation: systems worked overtime to convert the chaos into understandable words. "They do not accept natural limits," cried one voice. "They think reality is something to be changed," shouted another. "How can we coexist with beings who see the universe as a construction project?" asked a third. High Counselor Thexmar raised his massive arms to restore order to the chamber. When quiet returned, he looked directly at the three humans with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. "Humans," he said. "The Council must ask this question directly. When you say you have barely started, what exactly do you mean? What is humanity's ultimate goal?" The three humans looked at each other. Ambassador Thompson spoke first. "We mean that we are still learning what we are capable of. We have only been traveling between stars for about a century. Most of our people still live on our homeworld. We have not really begun to explore our potential," General Phillips added. "From a military perspective, we have not even established proper defenses for our core systems. We are still learning how to coordinate operations across multiple star systems. We are barely organized on an interstellar scale." Dr. Rogers nodded enthusiastically. "And scientifically, we are just scratching the surface of what might be possible. We understand maybe 1% of how the universe really works. There are so many questions we have not even thought to ask yet." The honesty in their voices was more frightening than any threat could have been. These humans genuinely believed they were at the very beginning of their development. They spoke of their current achievements, which already surpassed most galactic civilizations, as minor first steps on a much longer journey. A small alien that looked like a floating brain asked the question that everyone was thinking. "Humans, if your current capabilities represent barely getting started, what do you imagine your species will become when you reach your full potential?" The three humans were quiet for a long moment. Finally, Ambassador Thompson answered with complete honesty. "We do not know. We have never encountered limits that we could not eventually overcome. We do not know if such limits exist." The simple statement settled over the chamber like a death sentence. Here was a species that had achieved, in centuries, what others accomplished in millennia, and they genuinely did not know where their capabilities might end. They did not accept the word impossible. They treated fundamental forces as engineering challenges, and they spoke of reshaping reality as if it were a hobby project for their descendants. High Counselor Thexmar stood slowly, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. "The Council thanks the human delegation for their honesty. We will need time to consider what we have learned here today." As the session ended and the aliens began filing out of the chamber, Carl Thompson could hear fragments of worried conversations in dozens of languages. Words like unprecedented, dangerous, and uncontrollable were repeated over and over. The three humans remained in their seats, confused by the strong reaction their honest answers had generated. They had come to the Council hoping to build stronger relationships with their galactic neighbors. Instead, they had unknowingly revealed the true scope of humanity's potential. In meeting rooms throughout Nexus Station, emergency conferences were already beginning. Military commanders discussed defensive strategies. Scientists calculated projection models. Diplomats tried to figure out how to coexist with a species that might eventually control the fundamental forces of reality itself. The galaxy had existed in relative stability for millions of years. Different civilizations rose and fell, but the basic balance of power remained constant. No single species had ever possessed the combination of rapid advancement, unlimited ambition, and casual confidence that humanity displayed.